Main event time. So we're going back to the UFC Flyweight division. It is a bit of a historic situation because UFC Flyweight's never been the most beloved division in the UFC. Dana White's spoken about trying to cut the division for many, many years. The fans haven't really been all that interested for a long time now. And yet here we are, 2 title fights in 2 months. The flyweights have basically saved the UFC's winter because Deivison Figueiredo is back in action once again. He got that minute submission up against Alex Perez, and he's going up against Brandon Moreno, who's also got a quick turnaround. Now this is 21 days between Figueiredo's 2 title fights. If he was to pull this off, he would break Ronda Rousey's record for the shortest time between 2 title defences. For me though, this is a really intriguing fight, arguably a bit more intriguing than the one that we had against Alex Perez. There was a lot of people who sort of came into that fight thinking, well, Alex Perez is very underrated, and I was one of those people. I tried to sell the idea of Alex Perez being a legitimate threat in that fight, and yet for Figueiredo to just submit him straight away, I think a lot of people at that point sat up and said, hey, Figueiredo is the real deal, and he could very well dominate this division for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a huge Figueiredo fan. Like among the hipsters at the fight site, I'm probably the biggest of them because he's not the kind of fighter I tend to like. Really, he's very athletically dependent, which is something that tends to be a red flag. But he's also very good at using it. To compare it to the recently cut Yoel Romero, I think is a decent comparison. But I don't really take the same lessons from the Perez fight. I think Perez is a tougher opponent for Figueiredo than Moreno is. But only if the fight gets to the point where Perez can do things. And I think a fight that short doesn't really say a ton. But yeah, I mean, for as long as that fight went, Figueiredo looked very good. He was attacking the body very early. Perez also looked good. I like the takedown entry he hit underneath Figueiredo's right hand. He was kicking actively. He realized that he didn't want to really be in the pocket with Figueiredo, which is why he was able to connect Figueiredo's pocket entry to the takedown. Few cheeky fence grabs, which is always cool because fence grabs are the kind of cheating that I can get behind. But yeah, there's a line there, right? You have sneaky headbutts, which is fine, fence grabs, which is fine, versus eye pokes and nut shots, which are not fine. But yeah, Figueiredo did one of the acceptable Yoel Romero, oh, you're such a lovable rogue type cheating, and he got the win. He did that weird, what was it, like Connie Basami, I think, the leg lock entry. And then guillotined him as Perez tried to pass with the body lock, which was pretty cool. So I don't think that fight goes like that reliably, but I do think Figueiredo wins that fight pretty reliably. That fight didn't change my mind on it, but I think that's a winnable fight for Figueiredo. Moreno, I honestly think is easier, and I think that's a controversial opinion.
I like Brandon Moreno. I think he's one of those sort of all-action fighters. The flyweight division has a lot of those sort of fast scrambling types, and I can see possibly Moreno maybe trying to scramble and get himself into sort of like a rear naked choke sort of position. But to do that, he's got to try and take Figueiredo down. And that's where I think he's going to have some issues. Because if you look at a lot of Moreno's takedowns, he relies on sort of like that sort of shooting in for the double leg when someone's up against the fence. I think the way to beat Figueiredo is very much in the same way that Formiga did. You've got to trouble him with a couple of leg kicks and then shoot in when you're in the middle of the octagon. And once he gets down there, Figueiredo, he does have good core strength. He is able to scramble, but Formiga did very well just holding him down and grinding out that decision. I don't think Moreno's that type of grappler. He's got great jiu-jitsu. His takedowns can be effective in the right circumstances. I just don't see him being able to do that.
Yeah, so the thing about the matchup, I think, is that the spots of vulnerability we've seen from Figueiredo are mostly in the Formiga fight, and it hasn't exactly just been wrestling, in my opinion. I think it's been Formiga drew him forward, and Formiga was able to play a very sound, very conservative outfighting game, very good lateral movement, very stingy about the reads that he gave Figueiredo, which is important because if you give Figueiredo a lot of inputs, he's very quick at making reads. He's very, very quick. And I think that's something that if you're going to gas Figueiredo out, the path to doing that is to fight like a Pantoja fight, where Pantoja pretty much got knocked out 17 times and was just somehow still there to see Figueiredo gas out. And I don't think that's a replicable route for anybody. So I think Is there a fighter like Formiga? I don't really think so. I think Sergio Pettis would have been interesting because Sergio Pettis would have drawn Figueiredo out, tried to extend the range and go on the back foot, jab to draw counters. But I also think that the dynamism difference there is going to eventually show up because Figueiredo is going to do something crazy and end up on the inside and nuke him or wrestle him or something like that. In terms of the wrestling, I think Moreno preferring the body lock as a takedown is going to keep him away from the guillotine, but I also don't really know if Moreno is the lockdown threat that Alex Perez was. Alex Perez has a really good riding game. He's brilliant from front headlock. I think Moreno is more of like a scrambly type, and I don't think that someone who's able to athlete themselves out from underneath a genuine control artist like Jussier Formiga is going to have trouble scrambling out of a guy who's decidedly less focused on control and more on, guillotines and rear naked chokes that are like quick. They're very quick. He's not the kind to hold someone down and work from there the way Formiga does. So, in terms of how the matchup works, I think if Moreno comes out trying to pressure and push her pace the way Pantoja did and the way he did against Kai Kara-France, he's probably just going to get killed. Moreno's not great. He's aggressive in exchanges, but I don't think he's great. He doesn't have great punching form. He's not very good defensively whatsoever. He got counterpunched to death by Alexandre Pantoja, which is not great. Pantoja's a good counterpuncher in my opinion, but Figueiredo's probably the best in the division right now. He counterpunched Joe Benavidez with relative, I wouldn't say ease, but very reliably over the 3 rounds that fight happened. So I think if Moreno tries to give Figueiredo too much, he's going to get killed. And if he doesn't give Figueiredo enough, Figueiredo's probably just going to back him up and hit his body a lot. I think this is kind of an easy matchup for Figueiredo, but that could age badly because Figueiredo's a weird fighter. Like I feel like he's more reliable than people give him credit for, but there's always the risk that a guy like him who's so reliant on power punching just kind of concedes a decision at some point. But I think Figueiredo beats him off.
And I think the other concern that I have with Figueiredo is Figueiredo cuts a lot of weight to get down to 125. We know that Brandon Moreno can do 25 minutes. I think he had that fight, I think it was against Sergio Pettis, which went the distance. So we know he can do it. But Figueiredo cutting so much weight, if Moreno can get this into the championship rounds, like rounds 4, rounds 5, what kind of Figueiredo are we going to see there?
Well, I think if Figueiredo's dictating the exchanges the way I expect him to, I think we see Figueiredo look perfectly fine. Because, I think Figueiredo is the kind to slow down in a fight where he's doing a lot, but I also don't think a lot of fighters can get through a phase where Figueiredo's doing a lot, and Moreno's among them. Moreno's super durable. That's something that we hadn't mentioned. But I also think that Figueiredo's like a pound-for-pound tier puncher. And if you just keep walking into those without the defense that Moreno doesn't have, it's not going to go well. So I think Figueiredo's going to be able to limit exchanges here. And if he does, then Moreno's going to have trouble enforcing the pace and getting Figueiredo to gas out 4 and 5 enough to pick up a win. Now, if Moreno just walks into him, eats a ton of damage for 2 rounds, is still there after round 2, Figueiredo's just completely knackered, then there's a route. But that seems like something that's pretty low percentage. It's not as much a real path to winning as it is like, I wouldn't say luck, but something it will be something you'd see Daniel Cormier doing. And that's not a compliment. So I don't think Moreno has a reliable path to winning here with the cardio. It's just that he might win with it if he's able to just tank everything Figueiredo throws.